but the slow ride. So we really wanted to stop the viaducts. Many of you who maybe follow the campaign on Instagram have seen me talking about the viaducts. So, I mean, you can see from here that the condition of the viaducts is, like, frankly pretty alarming. So, for those of you who don't know me, I work as an architect, and I teach structures. And I used to have to walk under this viaduct all the time to get to the red line. And the more that you look at this, like, the more, frankly, fucked up you see that it is. So basically, when steel is exposed to water and salt, it rusts. And part of preventative maintenance is that you need to paint it to keep it from rusting. This preventative maintenance was not done, and not done adequately over decades. And now we have a situation where this bridge and this viaduct and dozens like it across the city, and a lot in the ward, are, like, literally degrading before our very eyes. And it's a very alarming situation, because if you've ever been here during the ball game, there's, like, hundreds of people walking under this very unsafe structure. So the metaphor that I use for this is, it's like, nothing might not ever happen, but because of all this deferred maintenance, this bridge is like a loaded gun, right? And it might not ever go off, but the safe thing to do would be to take the bullet out of the gun, right? And do the maintenance and repair work that they need to do to keep us safe, to keep us safe. It's also just an eyesore, frankly, you know? So when we bike under the bridge, you know, take a look around, and you'll notice that you have columns that you can literally see through, right? Structural members that are, that you don't need to be an architect or a structural engineer to see that they're out of ground. And again, this whole situation is, I think, just a failure to act and hold the railroads accountable by our elected officials at almost every level. So, you know, already a couple of the viaducts, based on the kind of pressure, calls to the alderman's office, pressure I think from the video that we made, have resulted in calls to the railroads. We've already resulted in some temporary repairs in some of the viaducts, but a temporary fix is a temporary fix, right? So, yeah, that's the viaducts.
Yeah, and I want to point out there's a train sitting up there right now. You know, a lot of times when I've sent pictures to people, they've said, well, are those in use? Yes, they are in heavy use. And that is really concerning, because trains are incredibly heavy, as you can imagine. I've sent a formal letter with documentation, with pictures, with words like structure failure critical, right? Which should ring alarm bells. I sent that to maybe 35 officials. I sent an actual printed out letter to President Joe Biden. I emailed Pete Buttigieg, who's the Secretary of Transportation. I sent a letter to the Illinois Secretary of Transportation. All kinds of people at every level of government. I have not gotten one response. I think the issue here is that this is owned by Union Pacific. Not only are they responsible for fixing it, no one else can. It's not allowed. It's illegal. The city can't just decide to fix these columns and do it because it's not their property. The city isn't even allowed to go up there and inspect it or to see the information about this structure in order to make an assessment of whether or not it's safe. I think the issue here is that the railroad companies are so powerful that nobody wants to step out of line and do something about it. So
like, the city can't make anybody do anything about it, and it feels, I don't have any answers, but like, it's kind of scary. It's spooky.
And luckily your alderman did introduce a resolution and a hearing about it, at least the city council did.
One thought I have is I'm surprised that the railroads insurance companies aren't going crazy about this. And it's really hard. Like, I did a lot of research on this and found out a lot of stuff. But one thing that was very difficult to find out like legislative research aids or something like that. Maybe that's an angle also.
That's a good idea. I talked to a guy who was like, you know, they're gonna let it go until it like crashes and hurts someone. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm convinced that even that would do the trick. Because up in, what was it, Glenview, a bridge collapsed, owned by Union Pacific, and it killed 2 people. And they said, well, that was a really hot day, and there was this random problem with the tracks, and, you know, nothing to see here, right? Accidents happen. And, you know, the family tried to sue Union Pacific, and they didn't win, or they withdrew it mysteriously. You know, I don't know. If this fell down and it killed somebody, I don't know if all the other ones would get replaced, because I feel like they would come up with some kind of reason about how it's not the state of it that caused it. Alright, well that was fun. I be on the lookout. Continue to agitate around this. I hope we eventually get a hearing. If your alderman has not signed on to support the resolution to have a hearing, please bug them about it. Nicole actually has signed on now today, I think, because so many people gave her a lot of crap about it. So thank you for those of you who did that. Hopefully we get this hearing, and if we do, please come and, you know, hopefully they'll make it public.
There's not. Yeah.
So, on to the second stop. One is the very famous Stockyards Gate, and then the Stockyards Bank. So, you know, a couple of things of note here. I mean, the Stockyards were the industrial hub of Chicago. Part of like the whole history of Bridgeport, right, is people working class folks who moved here to work at the stockyards. You know, this is Chicago is the hog butcher of the world, and that happened here. There's still lots of like meat packing businesses here, but more than that, there's lots of like industrial parks that they built over the site of the old stockyards. So I mean that factors into like the working class history of the neighborhood. I think like a history that like we are in some ways a continuation of. But also I want to point out the Stockyards Bank. So this was the bank that bankrolled all of the meatpacking businesses and all of the factories. It was the bank for many workers who worked in the stockyards. And it's been abandoned for quite a while. It's actually owned by the city right now. So the city has this program called the Negotiated Sale Program, where they will sell somebody a building for $1 if they've got the money to rehabilitate it. And this building is sitting here vacant, waiting for that opportunity for years and years and years now. And the former alderman's dream was to put a steak restaurant in it, which is kind of goofy, you know. But I think that. But I think that there's a, you know, real opportunity here, especially since this is part of the neighborhood that has seen many challenges with investment to really envision this building as something else, right? And something that kind of taps into that history of the neighborhood. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a cool spot. This is also, by the way, if you've heard of like the 1968 Democratic Convention, Like that was a big thing. Like all of that went down in Grant Park, but the DNC convention itself happened where the Aramark building is. There used to be a stadium there.
Oh, is that called like international?
Yeah.
I was just reading something about it. I was just reading something and it was like this stadium on the south side of Chicago, and I was like, I don't think that.
Yeah, it does not. That's where it used to be, and so there's like a history of like working class work and resistance and all of those things like just all around us here, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
They did talk about one thing Captions did putting on the upper level actually a collaboration with the Chicago History Museum to have a Stock Yards Museum.
That's actually a good idea.
So I think that would be really cool, and hopefully that's
Some like that necessarily knows.
hopefully that's still a possibility.
Sidewalks in some places are, I don't know, like 2.5 feet wide. They're maybe wide enough to get a wheelchair through, but if you're coming on and you've got a shopping cart or anything, you got to get into the street. And Archer Avenue over here is 7 lanes wide in a couple of places. People want to cross the street because there's not a good crosswalk.
All the time.
Yes, all the time. It's a very dangerous situation. There's a grocery store that people in the community use. People work in this plaza over here. So it definitely is very car-centric, and it's difficult to get around on foot or bike here. There are also plans to improve the river walk all along here. There's some sections that have been built. And then our next stop is going to be over at the Eleanor Boathouse, where there's some more of the Riverwalk built. But it'd be great if somehow all of this could get connected over here. It's really a problematic area, and as somebody personally who goes every day into McKinley Park to take my kid to school, it's dangerous to get to our neighbor over here, and I'd like to see that change.
Yeah, I think in my vision of the future, Archer would be much, much narrower, and that would also allow us to make the sidewalk going over the bridge wider. It's very small if you've been on it, and I think it would be. I want us to think about like how we can reimagine what our built environment is like in that way. Like it's not a crazy project to make Archer much
think too that there's like a relationship between like the aesthetics of the buildings and like the car centricness of it, because these buildings on Archer are like so beautiful.
Oh my God.
They're so stunningly gorgeous, and the storefronts, like, people have not put money into the storefronts because, like, why would you when cars are just zooming by it? And if traffic is slower and there are more pedestrians out and about, like, it incentivizes businesses to take advantage of like the small business improvement fund money to like make a more beautiful storefront, which I think would just help make the neighborhood a little bit prettier and help us take better advantage of like this amazing like built heritage that we got.
Yeah, and research I've done about traffic calming measures has said that if it feels like a more neighborhoodly street, if there is more like landscaping and the street's narrower and there's like a lot of retail spaces, that drivers instinctively move a little slower because it doesn't feel as much like a highway.
Yeah, and
I'd also like to make one last comment here. You know, we can all just listen to how noisy it is here.
Yeah.
With the, not only Archer Avenue, but the expressway. Cars are super loud, and it's not pleasant to walk or hang out when you can't even hear yourself think. So
Yeah.
a lot of these things could go a long way to making it a more enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I've really noticed the like people crossing, and I'm sure I've done it too, of like people crossing Archer by the train station and stuff. And I like literally had the thought, like, you see people doing it in the same places all the time. Like, it's just a pattern, so it's like there needs to be a crosswalk.
Yeah.
Like, it's like this is a path people are naturally forging. And it's like so dangerous. It's incredible. There has been more accidents there, but like even to get to the train station, you have to cross like the place where the bus depot happens, and there's not like an actual like crosswalk. It's just crazy. It's just like people are forging the path. It's like you can't see it like when you walk in grass. You know how you can see when people like take a shortcut and then you can see it in grass. It's like I feel like that's there, but you can't see it. Yep. Yeah. The problem is like we're leaving the development of those trails to private entities that own those things. We're gonna talk about that. Alright, I typed the thing up, but I'm just gonna read it. I didn't memorize it or anything. So, open. Eleanor Boathouse. So in recent years, the Park District has built 4 different boathouses throughout the city, and they're meant to connect the public to the river. Okay. As a source of recreation. And the thesis of the project is connected to urban environmentalism. The idea is that such investment, or the ideal, is that such investment in the river as a public resource will also encourage stewardship. They do kayak rentals here, outdoor and indoor classes in rowing and other kind of recreational activities, and events connected to that mission of stewardship. So they've started to install like floating gardens. There was also like a floating museum at one point. This boathouse, opened in 2016, is especially symbolic in that context. So it's located along what is known as Bubbly Creek right here. This is the south branch, the south fork of the Chicago River. It's an isolated little nub. We learned about the stockyards earlier. Well, back in the day, they dumped blood and intestines and other organic waste into this river, and as that stuff decomposed, it created gases that made the water bubble. Isn't that cute? There have been promises to clean up this river forever, and there's been some remediation, but it's not there yet. Okay, so I have a fun quote from the book Jungle by Upton Sinclair. If you really, we're gonna go for it. I'm gonna read this amazing quote he has about Bubbly Creek. The grease and chemicals that are poured into it undergo all sorts of strange transformations. which are the cause of its name. It is constantly in motion as if huge fish were feeding in it, or great leviathans disporting themselves in its depths. Bubbles of carbonic gas will rise to the surface and burst, and make rings 2 or 3 feet wide. Here and there, the grease and filth have caked solid, and the creek looks like a bed of lava. Chickens walk about on it, feeding, and many times an unwary stranger has started to stroll across and vanish temporarily. I want to say that I looked up a picture of this, and there's literally a man standing on like a gross chunk of like island in the river.
It's a picture of a chicken walking on it. Like you can just see it.
It's amazing. It was real, like when you hear this description, you can get a sense of how bad it was. The Packers used to leave the creek that way so every now and then the surface would catch on fire and burn furiously, and the fire department would have to come and put it out. Once, however, an ingenious stranger came and started to gather this filth and scows to make lard out of. Then the Packers took the cue and got an injunction to stop him, and afterwards gathered it themselves. The banks of Bubbly Creek are plastered thick with hairs, and this also the Packers gather and clean. Okay, so that's the end of that really beautiful, poetic section. That is a quote from Upton Sinclair. Okay, so you've likely noticed if you live around here that there are disconnected trails all along the river. There's one behind the mansions over there called Bridgeport Village. There's another next to the new Amazon warehouse, which is that way. And there's one across Ashland, so over there. On the other side, there's actually another trail back there that I've been on. It has some amazing industrial views. Those exist because there's a law that if you develop on the river, you have to make the riverfront publicly accessible. So Amazon is not doing that to be nice. Whoever owns the property over there, they do it to be nice is because it's the law. So imagine if we could have walking and biking paths all the way up the river. There's a lot of promise of what Bubbly Creek could become if the project to revitalize it is realized, and considering all the undeveloped land along it. So what will it become, and who will have a say? Disconnection. There's paths, but they don't lead anywhere. There's a boathouse for the river, but the river isn't clean. On top of that, this park sits right next to a bunch of high-index polluters that have gone pretty unchecked while they pump toxic dust into the air. There's often some pretty strong smells around here. So I thought maybe we could talk about these disconnections and what we can imagine for a future where things are planned in a way that beautiful things like this can be enjoyed. But it's pretty windy and cold.
When I think about like the disconnected paths, I think about the project that they're just now finishing up on the north branch of the river, where they connected a bunch of sections near Addison and Lawrence. So they connect all these different little bits of river path so that you actually don't have to cross the street or go out into the road and back in. It took a long time, but like seeing the usage it gets and the different types of people who are now walking and cycling on that is, I think, very inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I also think there should be a pedestrian bridge so that you can get across Bubbly Creek to the other side where McKinley Park is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's funny because I was at the Wilson Park getting ready for a canvas, and I started talking to someone, and they were like, yeah, I wish there was a pedestrian bridge. And I pulled up the website, and I was like, here's where I say that we should have a pedestrian bridge. They were like, oh my god.
All been to the Halstead Street Viaduct, I think. So I think that there's like a couple things to say about it next time you're passing under there. Like first, I mean, I think like the Amazon warehouse that's come up, you know, there's that bike infrastructure issue there. And frankly, it's a car infrastructure problem too. Like, you know, there will be all kinds of accidents and stuff once that opens up. And I mean, I think that is like a clear failure of the last alderman to like advocate for the residents, and especially like when we look at this boathouse. I mean, like, this is amazing to show like how the river can be a public resource, and like what a huge missed opportunity to like even put housing there or anything else besides a warehouse. But I think beyond that site was the site of something called the Battle of the Viaducts, which was this huge street fight between working class residents of Bridgeport and the cops during a labor strike. And I think that for me anyway, like the story that tells is kind of plugs into everything else. Like this is like a beautiful neighborhood with like beautiful people who like more often than not stand up for what's right? And I mean, there's negative histories in the neighborhood too. There's things that we want to fix infrastructure-wise, but there's also like a robust history of like working class people like getting together and organizing, and I think that's what this campaign is about. So that's a cool thing to have that history and like keep highlighting and working in the better parts of it, you know. So.
Yeah, I think, I don't know what you guys think. It's a possibility, I think, that we could just go back to the office at this point, and we have hot chocolate, we have tea, we have a hot water heater now, we can make a pot of coffee, and we could talk more about all of this and do it in the toasting warrants. I have like some stuff from other stops that we could just discuss.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? What do you guys think?